Today we're going to talk about using files with your program. So in other words, opening a file and reading data from a file and saving data to a file from your program when it's running. As far as being able to open a file and read from a file, from an engineering standpoint, a lot of the engineering systems that you'll work on, like you might go in and design something or you're testing something, and when you're testing, like let's just say you're, well, like for instance, when I was doing my research, the data I was getting was pressure data. So I would get files that had like over 100,000 data points, and I had to read those in. So I read those into a program, analyzed the data, and then got results. So it wouldn't be possible to physically type in like that many data points. And so being able to open a file, read that data in is basically something that is required for engineering analysis. Some of the reasons why we want to use files for data storage is basically then we can use files instead of the keyboard, monitor, screen for input. And then also the user doesn't need to re-enter the data each time they run the program. So that's already been kind of annoying with some of the programs we've done. And we're not entering very much data so far, but it's been kind of annoying with just having to go through and input maybe 7 or 8 pieces of data every time you run the program. So it would be a lot easier just to read the data from a file. So there's some steps for using files. First of all, in the code, and I'm going to show you the exact code in a minute, but let's just look at the steps first. The first step is that you need to open the file. And you need to open the file whether you're reading from a file or printing to a file, like saving your output to a file. And then the step 2 is that you're going to use the file. So when I say use the file, I mean read from, write to, or both. So I'm just going to put read from, write to the file, or both. And when I say read to, so read from a file, this is basically read data from an input file. And the write to is basically write data to an output file. So the third step is that you're going to close the file. And we're going to talk about that, but it's important to close a file when you open it in a program. So when you open a file, basically what you're doing is you're connecting the file to your program. So then the program can use the file. And when you close a file, you're basically disconnecting the file from your program. So then the program can't use the file anymore. And there's a few different kinds of files. There's a text file and a binary file. So a text file is a file that's encoded in text. So this is basically encoded in ASCII or like some other encoding system. And this text files can be opened up in a text editor. So you can open up a text file and view it. And these are the types of files that we're going to be using in this section, or this chapter. Binary files are files that haven't been converted to text, or they're like basically a binary file. And you're going to be learning how to access these in chapter 12. So for those of you who are taking CS 1410, so yeah, you'll be learning how to access binary files. And then there's also a couple of file access methods, and you've probably heard of these. There's what's called sequential access and random access. So sequential access is basically like a cassette tape. Random access is like a CD. So in a CD, you can skip to where you want to be in the file. So in this section, we're going to be looking at sequential access. So this is this chapter. And the random access is going to be in chapter 12. So now let's look at how we would actually code this to access a file. So first of all, we need to include the header file fstream. So pound include fstream, and then there's two file stream, or actually there's three file stream types. So there's ifstream, and this is for input from a file. So this is for input from a file. There's ofstream, and this is for output to a file. And then there's fstream, and this is for input or output to a file. So this is input, output to a file. And this is going to be in chapter 12. So for this section, we're only going to be looking at the first two. First of all, if we want access to a file, so basically we want to input from a file, we need to define an ifstream object, and so we can name this what we want. I'm just going to call it input file. And then we need to open the file. So we're going to use input. So this is the name of whatever your object is. So input file dot open. And then you're going to put the name of your file here. So let's say the name of the file is customers.txt. So what this is going to do, this right here is going to create the file stream. And this is going to actually open the file to read from. So open the file to read from. And then if we want to output to a file, we need to define a ofstream object. So this is just ofstream, and then whatever we want to call this. So I'm just going to call this output. So output file. And then, so this is going to create the file stream, so basically like what we did here. And then we're going to have the name that we use, so output file, and this is .open because we're opening the file. And then let's just call this employees.txt. So this is going to open the file to write to. So open file to write to. And one thing I want to mention with this is this, when we run this, so when we use this open, this is going to create a file to write to. So if the file already exists, it's going to delete the file and create a new one. So you want to be careful with that when you're doing the output files. So another thing I want to mention is, let's say that we're doing this input file, and so the way I have this here, where I just have the name of the file, this is assuming that the file is in your working directory. If the file isn't in your working directory, you can give it a path, but you need to do it like this. So you would have, let's say it's on the C drive, and then data, and then it's in a folder called data, and then, actually I'm changing the name of the file. This is still customers. So we need these double slashes here. Double backslash represents one backslash in a string literal. So if you only put in 1 backslash, it's not going to go to your directory. And then after, so these are both, so this one is if we want to open a file and read from the file. This one is if we want to open a file and output to a file. So both of these we're opening a file, and when we open a file, after we're done using that file, we want to close the file. So let's say we want to close this first one. This is going to be input file.close. And if we want to close the second one, it's just output file.close. And we always want to close files. Whenever you open a file, you want to close a file. And the reason why is because, well, first of all, it's good programming practice to close a file when you open it. You have temporary data that's stored in what's called your file buffer. And when you close the file, this data is saved to the file before it closes, so it's not lost. If you don't close the file and say your program crashes or somehow it doesn't get saved to the file, then you'll lose the data. So when you close the file, it's going to write the data that's in the file buffer to the file. The other reason is some operating systems limit the number of files that you can have open. So if your program is opening a bunch of files, it might not run right on some operating systems. So it's just a really good idea to always close your files if you open them. And this is after you're done using it. So after you're done using it, close the file.